Good morning. It'll just be a few moments. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thanks for joining me again this week. Happy May. It's really amazing how quickly the year is flying by. I hope everyone's had a good week. Everyone is enjoying some time outside. This is the 66th, sorry, this is the 60th installment of my weekly virtual office hour address. A year ago, I thought it'd be a great idea to convert my weekly office hours at the coffee shop downtown Sunnyvale into a live stream address. And people continue to say that they appreciate these weekly addresses, hearing from their mayor. So I'll continue them through the end of shelter in place and probably a little bit longer. We've now reached 417 days since the March 16th, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to really slow the spread of COVID-19. And a lot has happened over the last year, and something seems to happen almost every day. And definitely, I just want to thank you for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during these ever-changing times. Hope everyone's doing well, staying healthy. Please stay safe, get your vaccination, and pretty much almost everyone can get a vaccination at this point. There's lots of doses within the county, and a lot of the healthcare providers now have adequate vaccines. So definitely do that. As I mentioned um, last week, I'll be cycling out my background art every week provided by local artists. So this week, today's piece is called Herd Immunity, and it's provided by Andrea Coutura, who's a part of our Sunnyvale Art Club. And so, every week it gives you a little change of scenery behind the mayor here. So with that, if you want to purchase any of the art, definitely just feel free to reach out to me, and I'll put you in contact with the artist. Pretty much everything that I'm displaying is up for sale. So if you want to support local art, that's one of the things that you can do if you see a piece that really catches your eye. And this in today's piece was is pretty appropriate for COVID and where we stand today. Anyway, definitely keep following the county health orders. Do your part to stop the spread of the virus. You know, of course, wear your mask if you're out with people that you think might not be vaccinated. Definitely wear your mask indoors. It's still part of the county health order. And get your vaccination. The majority of people and now 16 and older can get vaccinated, and they're currently looking at middle schoolers. So under 12 to 15 will be the next group being vaccinated. So let's go ahead and get started on what's happened at the federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks. Last Monday, the California Secretary of State announced that the recall of Governor Newsom had met the state's threshold with enough validated signatures to force a recall election. And that kicks off certain things. First, it's a 30-day period in which those who signed the recall petition may withdraw their names. Although, in talking to county officials, it doesn't seem like that will be the case. County election officials have, after that 30 days, then they have 10 days to report how many signatures have been withdrawn. But seeing that it's around 2 million signatures and they only need 1.5 million, most likely the recall will go forward. So after the 30 days and then the 10 days of reporting, if the threshold is still met, then the election would take place after a budgetary review and the scheduling. I've heard anywhere, it could be as much as 400 million. We'll see what the actual election cost will be and what the timing will be. I've heard anywhere as early as end of summer to as late as December. So there's a lot of logistics that actually need to get done as far as the recall is concerned. And then last Monday, Santa Clara County Health announced that they've changed all the clinics within the county to no appointment walk-up vaccinations for anyone 16 years of age and older. So no appointments needed. You can go to sccfreevax.org and find out which clinics currently are open, what their hours are. But at least from Tuesday to Sunday of last week, all 13 clinics had no appointment or walk-up. And this was mainly because of federal vaccine allotment had come to the county about a week before. So after our federal representatives did a lot of work as far as making sure that there's appropriate vaccines and a federal supply, because the state wasn't meeting our needs of vaccines. And so because of equity allotments and basing it upon zip code as opposed to census tract, and we had an equity need within our county. So after our federal officials basically did their part and got us additional vaccines from the federal government, that's been an additional about 300,000 vaccines that we're getting over the next month. So that allowed the county to change what they were doing to get more doses, and making it as easy as just showing up to get vaccinated. And that's not just county health clinics, but a lot of the other healthcare facilities around the county now have adequate vaccines. So it's all positive from that standpoint. And definitely get your vaccine. I got mine about a month ago now. And so I got J&J, and J&J, the county still had, the J&J was temporarily halted, but the county still had about 13,000 J&J vaccines that they're now making also available, but it's mainly Moderna and Pfizer. And then last Tuesday, it was announced that that REI will be moving into the old Toys R Us Babies R Us store here in Sunnyvale. And this had been in the works for about the last 18 months. But and it's always, you never know whether or not a business deal is going to fall through, whether or not, especially a store moving from one location, so that's moving the Mountain View store into Sunnyvale, would actually take place. And then COVID happened, and so you never that threw yet another question mark into all of it. But construction has started. They put the fences around the site, and they're working on the interior. Ultimately, it's very good for Sunnyvale to have another retail location, especially one that's rather relatively unique within the North Bay here, or within the Bay Area. There's several in North Bay. There's several, in one in Fremont, one in Berkeley. So they're spread around, but it's good to have one here, in our local community, and they're good community partners, which is also a positive effect of having them in your community. So they fund, the 5K races and the bike rides and all that. So I can't wait. They're planning. Last I heard, they should be opening sometime in the fall after they finish all the changes. And it will be a bigger store than what was in Mountain View. So that's also a positive thing for having a wider selection of items at that store too. And then last Wednesday, water agencies released info asking residents to conserve water. After 2 dry winters, we've had, lots of issues that looking forward. As far as the summer, there will be, most likely, it'll be a very bad fire season. And I saw a report earlier this morning on how much of the state is currently having issues with in drought conditions. So there are no big fines yet, but they're basically asking residents to do a 10% reduction in water. And they're also providing several carrots as far as funding for people who want to replace their lawns, convert toilets to low flow toilets. And so there's different programs that each of the different water agencies are doing. But it does make a big difference to reduce as much water, because we're about 40% what is normal this year. And our reservoirs are very empty, especially looking at a few of them, like Lake Mendocino and such. And then last Thursday, Governor Newsom was in San Fernando for a press conference. He signed Assembly Bill 80, and this was tax relief for businesses. And it had been approved. AB 80 was unanimously approved by both state houses. And so Governor Newsom signed that, and it amounts to about $6.2 billion for the small businesses. And these were businesses that have been granted forgiveness from their federal pandemic loans. So part of the federal loan program during COVID, and ultimately the state was scheduled to tax those amounts. And so this relief bill basically remove those state taxes on the amounts that the businesses had received from the federal government. And it's only provided to private companies that really experience significant loss due to the pandemic. And so it's all those PPP loans and the cost associated with those loans, as long as the businesses can show a 25% reduction in profits for at least one quarter during the pandemic. And I'd say most of the businesses, a lot of the businesses who can easily show that, showing things year to year. And then the governor also reported at that press conference that California has the lowest case rate in the United States, with about 33 cases per 100,000 people, and that's just fantastic. That's showing we're really starting to meet those numbers. As far as getting people vaccinated, people being outside, fresh air, doing social distancing, all the important things to make sure that people aren't spreading COVID. So that's really important. Surprisingly, Governor Newsom has had no press conferences this week, so it's been a little bit quiet at the state level. Um, but definitely things are still happening, and things are moving forward. Last weekend, uh, around our neighboring cities, several cities had anti-Asian hate rallies. There was one on Saturday in Santa Clara at Franklin Square, and I dropped by that for a little while, and then there was another one on Sunday in Palo Alto, um, that I wasn't able to attend. I had an all-day Sunday meeting, 10 to 4 p.m. But Councilmember Dean was there to represent Sunnyvale, so that was pretty positive from a just continuing to focus on the concept that violence and extremism aren't allowed and aren't supported in our communities, and making sure that people need to stand up when they see any injustice in their communities, and anti-Asian hate or hate against any ethnic group, any belief system, all that isn't allowed, and will be called out in our communities. And so it was good to have those rallies and continue to bring people together, in solidarity for a really important cause. I'm shocked that we continue to see hate crimes, and we'll talk about a hate crime that occurred in our community in a few minutes. But definitely, hate incidents and hate crimes are rampant within the Bay Area, within California, within throughout the nation. So putting a spotlight on that issue, I think, is really important. And then, on Sunday last weekend, the Heritage Park Museum opened for the first time in a year. So for those of you who haven't visited the museum, it's definitely really, it's one of the better museums I visited. I used to be on the board. I used to be president during the Sunnyvale Centennial in 2012. But it's reopened. It's open Sundays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays from noon to 4 p.m. And if you want to go take a look, it talks about Sunnyvale's history, kind of the Bay Area history, and Sunnyvale's always, to a large degree, represented and reflected the what's happening in the Bay Area, from the canneries to the defense industry in the 60s, to medical and technology companies, Yahoo, and uh, um, multiple like internet companies that have sprung up in the last 20 years. So definitely, if you get a chance, visit. It's at the community. It's right near the community center, right next to the orchard. And then on Tuesday of this week, Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors met, and Supervisor Lee and Semidian brought forth a proposal to have the county evaluate establishing temporary and permanent supportive housing solutions within Sunnyvale. And so this was, requesting that the county, basically county staff, bring to the board by August 31st of this year a proposal, outlining the steps for providing long-term housing for, mainly the Fair Oaks Park unhoused residents, that have been, temporarily relocated to one of the hotels here in Sunnyvale. And that was a large effort put forth by the city to find them, basically the unhoused that were at that park. We were trying to do renovations of Fair Oaks Park, and the county didn't have the resources to deal with shelters or basically any services. And so what we ended up doing was house the residents at that park, as well as provide the ongoing on-site services, by Home First. And so that was important. The county couldn't step up, and so now they're looking at what they can do in a long term to continue those services and then find that that the housing and supportive services that are really required for that, and trying to find a location within Sunnyvale, and definitely highlighting the Hamlin shelter site. That has been a big success after the armory closed about, I don't know, it was more about 10 years ago. Um, and so the armory closed, and the county found a good location to ultimately set up the what was at that point a cold weather shelter, and now this is all it's all by referral. It was a 125 bed shelter that's now transitioned and expanded to 175 bed shelter. Of course, under COVID, that's down to about 80 people because of social distancing required within the shelter. But it's having the appropriate supportive services, it's having washers and dryers and all that. Um, it's critical to make sure that that's a success, and figuring out whether or not that can be duplicated, whether or not there's other opportunities within our city. That's one of the things that the county staff will be looking at. And then as far as as far as affordable housing, Sunnyvale has been supporting a lot of affordable housing nonprofits to build, on build within Sunnyvale, and so Mid-Penn Housing is building. They have 11 different sites in Sunnyvale right now. So you hear about Mid-Penn, first Mid Peninsula Housing, First Housing, Catholic Charities or Charities Housing. So there's multiple nonprofits that continue to either buy land, buy hotels, convert it, upgrade it, all those sorts of things to provide affordable housing, and most importantly, provide the supportive services to make sure that if it's previously homeless or seniors or whatever, that they have the appropriate services that they need to make sure that that development is successful. So that's one of the things that the city continues to fund, and we look at affordable housing, and we're actually building on a site right at Iowa, Charles, and Matilda. We're actually funding a affordable housing project there for seniors, previously homeless, and people with developmental disabilities, right there, walking distance to downtown. So the city does a lot of that, working with nonprofits, helping. There's housing mitigation fees on all of the developments that will ultimately go, and we then use those funds to fund affordable profits so that they can build housing. And then on Tuesday of this week, Sunnyvale Council had a busy meeting. It was I think it was around 5 hours, but it started with 2 study session items. One of which was an update on the cultural inclusion study and plan. And so this was a study issue that we put forward, was put forward a few years ago. We finally funded it, but this is an update on kind of different proposals on what the city can do for basically cultural inclusion, and we've been doing things for years from an event standpoint. Whether or not that's Day of the Dead. There's always a big Lunar New Year celebration. So we do multiple events throughout the year, but also we've been looking at, and our deputy city manager, Jackie Guzman, has been kind of taking the lead from a unity standpoint, from a cultural inclusion standpoint. But this was looking at what we could do, whether or not we need full-time staff or full-time departments. The county has a full-time cultural inclusion department, and whether or not we can fully spend that with staff. There's different levels, and this is one of the bigger issues is from a budgetary standpoint, and we're going into a very difficult budget year. Definitely the revenue for last year isn't as much as we thought. The recovery is happening, but it's not happening as quickly as we would like, and there were things that we postponed at last year's uh, budget meetings, when we approved the 2020-2021 budget, we did some hard reductions. We froze a lot of positions. Definitely, we've had a lot of people, saying that we need some of those services reinstated. We need, some of those positions unfrozen, and we continue to evaluate that, and we'll be talking about this year's budget a little bit later. But definitely, this is a question of how much, from a services standpoint, whether or not it's one person, whether or not it's three people, it's figuring out what grants might be available. So, we gave some direction, and we'll have some decisions to make when the budget comes back to us later this month. And then we also had an update on our economic development strategy. So Sunnyvale's been working on, an economic development strategic plan, which hasn't been updated for over 10 years. And so staff gave some updates on outreach that had taken place, and some of the feedback that we got. Definitely that was very interesting. From a resident standpoint, 65% of surveyed residents say that they want more retail. That being said, so many people, especially under COVID, have been purchasing online, and so it's trying to make sure that we have a vibrant mix of retail that people can go to. Things like getting REI, and our economic development team it's constantly working with other small companies, big companies, big box stores, as much as we might not like them. Certain people say, I never shop there. There are tons of people that shop at Target and Costco within the city, and they provide, a good sales tax base for Sunnyvale. And, between that and our automobile sites, definitely those sales taxes make a difference within the city. So we look at constantly look at how we bring in new businesses, whether or not that's business to business, businesses that are selling to other businesses, or selling directly to residents. All those are positive. And as we continue to finish downtown, definitely we will see a lot more of what that up as from an option standpoint of getting more variety. So Ulta Beauty's open. There are several uh, basically phone carriers there. Infinity, AT&T. There's restaurants that will be opening. So you're going to see a lot more variety continue to be added to downtown. And then as we add additional office space and additional residential, there will be even more retail on the bottom of that. And then as far as businesses, they were really hit hard by COVID. And so, was looking at reevaluating their funding sources. The Sunnyvale Cares program gave away over $1.3 million, and that was to 195 different businesses, $5,000 to $15,000 grants. And then, the PPP loans given away by the federal government, over 1,700 loans of less than $150,000 went to local businesses, and then almost 400 businesses received loans greater than $150,000. So, it's estimated that saved, or at least preserved, about 16,000 jobs right here in Sunnyvale. So, all that was positive information. Even under COVID, around more than 500 new businesses opened in the last year. So it's not just the Dunkin' Donuts and the Dunkin' Donuts and Mountain Mike's, and I went to Mattress Firm, which opened in that same shopping center earlier or about 3 weeks ago. But definitely there are a wide variety of small businesses and mid-sized businesses that have opened and are moving to the city. So all that is good news as far as Sunnyvale is concerned. And it's looking at strategies to encourage more businesses here. How do we deal with permitting? What are the retail opportunities, and how do we promote those businesses that are opening up in the city? And then what is our long-term strategy as far as zoning is concerned, as far as creating the right spaces within the city to bring in businesses, retail, restaurants, all of that, and then looking at improving, our how we get business, promote businesses from social media, all of that, whatever we can do from a city standpoint to make it a robust location from a city and increase our sales tax dollars and give residents a place to go shop. And then as far as the main meeting is concerned, we had several special orders of the day for May that started it. It's Public Works Week coming up, and it was a good time to celebrate what our public works staff, over 300 staff, are doing. Keeping our parks and streets upkept. Making sure that our trees are trimmed, all those sorts of things. It's Municipal Clerks Week, so it was good to honor our city clerk and deputy city clerk. They've been doing a fantastic job over the last year, especially under COVID, where changing how we run meetings, how we deal with residents, being able to give updates and give public comment. That was really critical, and they've done a fantastic job. And then we also celebrated Nurses Week, and so that's next week. But Nurses Week was really important because nurses have done a fantastic job on the front lines during COVID, and it was good to bring in one of the nurses from El Camino Health. And Sunnyvale has a vaccination site because the partnership between El Camino Health, LinkedIn, who's providing the buildings, and the city of Sunnyvale to help promote and deal with some logistics. And so, one of the nurses from that site came and joined the meeting, and it was good to celebrate what they're doing. It's one of the largest professions within the United States. There's over 350,000 nurses just in California, and so ultimately, it was good to highlight the good that they're doing, on the front lines, the sacrifices that they've made under COVID, being away from their families and just putting their own lives at risk. So it's good if you know any nurses, definitely thank them next week, especially during Nurses Week. And then as far as the main meeting is concerned, we went through the redistricting outreach plan and meeting schedule. And so just a reminder, our redistricting committee, those applications are due at the end of May. And so that will be a committee of 7 main committee members, as well as 6 alternates. And so from that standpoint, I was going to we went through kind of the meeting schedule and the time. A lot of it was based upon when the data would be released, the census data, and a lot of that has been shifted. We thought we were going to first receive it in May or June, so we should have been receiving it this month. Now we won't be receiving it until the fall, but what we ended up was kind of lay out what PlaceWorks, and so it's a contract with PlaceWorks, and which is the same contractor consultant that the city staff worked with when we were doing the initial split of the city into 6 districts, and doing that community outreach and how residents can submit maps and go through that whole map making process. So once we get that census data, but we'll go through that similar process of redrawing those district boundaries based upon the latest data. And ultimately, there'll be lots of meetings, scheduled for later this summer and the fall. It'll be educating residents about the map making process. It'll be then reviewing the census data and then coming up with a final map by March 15th of 2022. So there's a lot of work to be done over the next year. Ultimately, the March 15th date is important so that we have the district boundaries set up. At least 205 days is the requirement from the county registrar before the November 2022 election, when we'll have our next set of district elections. So that was, so that kind of set that in motion and approving that general outreach that's going to be taking place. And definitely, if you're interested, uh, what you need to do is go to the city website and look for redistricting, and you have until the end of the month, 5 p.m. on, I think, Friday the 30th, to turn in your application. And then we also, council approved the 2021 Housing and Urban Development Action Plan. And so HUD gives a certain amount of money every year to the city, and then we redistribute it to different service organizations that are doing good within our community. So, it's never enough funds, but and it's always one of the things that I'm always advocating with our federal representatives on how we can get additional funds either from HUD or other funding to make sure that we can do as much as possible from a city standpoint. With that, let's go ahead and get to our weekly numbers for COVID testing, hospitalization, vaccinations. Nationally, cases and hospitalizations continue to fall, but of course around the world, especially India, Brazil, cases are surging, deaths are really rising. So that is definitely a worry. From a U.S. national standpoint, we've now surpassed 32.3 million cases. That's about another 300,000 cases in the last week, but that's definitely down from where it was before. And ultimately, it is generally looking good from a U.S. standpoint. As we get more and more people vaccinated, we've surpassed 252 million vaccines administered, but we've also now passed 575,000 deaths. That's about another 5,000 deaths just in the last week due to COVID. And so COVID isn't gone. It's definitely, the impact is reduced, and especially from a California standpoint, we've had we're still around 3.6 million positive cases. We're averaging about 1,500 cases a day, but that is the lowest rate in the nation. So that's positive from what California's been able to do. We've had 61,000 fatalities, but we're continuing to administer vaccines, which is making a difference as far as how many new cases we're getting. And so we've had over 31 million vaccines administered, about 2 million in the last week. So, the state is still looking good. We're still about number 11 on states with residents with at least one dose, and that's about 50% of our residents have had at least one dose. And we're still pretty low as far as residents that are fully vaccinated. So we're around number 29. I think we were 30 last week, with about 33% of our residents are fully vaccinated. So, things are looking good from a California standpoint, but we're definitely not out of the weeds, and people still need to follow the county health orders. Be masked when you're inside buildings, and just be generally safe. Get your vaccine when you can. And then from a county standpoint, cases continue to trend downward. We've had about 119,000 cases now. That's up another 500 from last week, but that's down from about 1,000 a week from a month ago. So we've slowly seen it drop from 1,000 to 600 to 500 this week. We've had 2,084 deaths due to COVID. That's another 20 in the last week, and we still have people that are hospitalized because of COVID. We have 63 people hospitalized. That's down from 73 last week. So people are still being infected and being sick enough that they need to be in the hospital. And as far as vaccinations within the county, we've had 634,000 people that have been fully vaccinated. That's about 39% are fully vaccinated. but we have over 1,154,000 people with at least one dose, and that's 71% of the county have at least one dose. And definitely from in talking to county health, they are worried about the number of variants and new variants coming in, and whether or not the vaccines are fully helpful as far as that's concerned. That being said, being fully vaccinated is your best chance to reduce the chance that you will be infected, and conceivably reduce the chance of having to go to the hospital getting sick. So definitely do whatever you can do to get your vaccine. And I continue to do a lot of advocating on our city's behalf, at the county level especially. The county pop-up van is always, it continues to be in Murphy Park for testing. So if you think that you might have been exposed, or especially for frontline workers that are being exposed to a wide variety of people, that's one of the things that the pop-up van is at Murphy Park on the second and fourth Monday. So they'll be back here this coming Monday, May 10th, from 9:30 to 4 p.m. So please, continue to get tested. If you want to sign up to get tested, you can go to sccfreetest.org and get tested. Although they are allowing a certain number of drop-in tests, so if you just want to drop by, that they will most likely have availability for you to get tested. And then the mobile vaccination clinic, so the county mobile vaccination clinic was at Columbia Neighborhood Center, and on Wednesday, and they're delivering about 500 doses. I'm currently working with them to look at other locations within Sunnyvale to get people vaccinated. And then as far as from a county standpoint, but then of course, as I mentioned earlier, El Camino Health partnered with LinkedIn to provide a vaccination site right on Maud Avenue, basically close to halfway between 237 and Mary. And they have been providing up to about 3,000 doses a day. You can get an appointment there, or you can just do a walk-in appointment. So you'll see signs along Maud Avenue near the LinkedIn site. So if you need to get vaccinated, that's one of the best places you can go. It's right here in the city. I'll be promoting more about what they're doing later today. And then if you want to get registered, if you want to find out all the different sites around the county to get registered to get your vaccine, or just do drop-in, you can go to sccfreevax.org and you can get that information. Let's go ahead and move to some of the upcoming events. Sunday, of course, is Mother's Day, so don't forget to honor that special mom in your life. Definitely, it's been a difficult year, and making sure that you honor all the hard work that moms are doing in your family, in your life. It's a great time to do that. And then the following Saturday, May 15th, so a week from tomorrow, the Friends of Sunnyvale Library will be having their book sale. And definitely a lot of people have been missing that book sale. They reduced them quite a bit under COVID and weren't taking donations. They have started taking donations again at the library, but definitely go ahead and visit the Sunnyvale book sale, which will be happening at the Sunnyvale Library right there on Olive on May 15th. So I think they're going to their early hours I think they'll be there the full day, but I'll be publicizing that too. And then a week from Thursday, so Thursday, May 20th, is our all-day budget session. And so the budget should be online in a few days. I got a hard copy late yesterday, and so this big stack of binders behind me is this year's budget. And so I have a lot of reading to do in the next 2 weeks, but this is one of the things that we'll be looking at from a council standpoint of what services that we're going to be affecting, what services we can bring back, and making some hard decisions from a budgetary standpoint of what we can do. And then on Tuesday, May 25th, that's our next big council meeting. Next week, we have actually several council meetings doing interviews for our boards and commissions. And so our boards and commissions, we talked about that over the last week, but we've had more than 30 people apply to our boards and commissions. And so we have quite a few interviews scheduled for next week as we start going through that process of interviewing people for the different, and going through their applications. But on the 25th is our next big meeting. We'll be making some decisions on what the recommended land use options are for the proposed amendments to the Moffett Park specific plan. And we've talked about this. There's been lots of outreach over the last year talking about what we could be doing from a Moffett Park plan as far as looking at the environmental impacts, but also looking at what the appropriate mix of office space, housing, and retail is out at Moffett Park. When I was on the Planning Commission almost 20 years ago, looking at the Moffett Park specific plan, at that point we were really only looking at office space, and now we're looking at from a mixed use standpoint, how to make neighborhoods, how to make communities out there, what the appropriate amount of housing, retail, and office space would be, and then also creating more, I'll say, a more park environment, creating large green strips, creating neighborhoods, creating walkable neighborhoods with a mixture of retail and housing and walkable to the office space that's out there. So we'll see, from an environmental impact report, we need to make some decisions on what will be studied from a kind of a maximum standpoint. Not saying that will ultimately be built, but your environmental impact report needs to look at all those things and set a maximum boundary. And then we'll also be, from a council standpoint, we'll be accepting on that same meeting, accepting the findings on the post-construction report for whether or not we maintain the existing configuration of the Maud Avenue Class 2 bike lanes. And so that's between, Borregas and Fair Oaks. We took out a lot of parking along the way and put in bike lanes and kind of did some reconfiguration of those streets. And we've heard, mixed things, some of which are complaints about the loss of parking, some of which are, can we do other things there? So we'll get that report at that meeting on May 20th. So, no, May 25th. May 20th is the budget meeting. May 25th, council meeting. So with that, let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. So several people ask, I saw that there was a hate crime that occurred in Sunnyvale last weekend. What happened? And so we talked a little bit about this last week. Le Bon Vietnamese restaurant, which is at Persian and Lawrence on the north side of Sunnyvale, right very close to 237. They had a window broken. They had a racist note left at the scene. And one of the good things about my mayor's restaurant project, meeting all the owners, the owners actually, they called public safety, of course, but they also reached out immediately to me. And, I met with them. I've met with them several times in the last week and a half. But, I was really saddened to, about this terrible act that occurred in our community. It doesn't reflect our values, our community values in any way. Extremism, hate, are not welcome in Sunnyvale, and hate crimes will not be tolerated. So public safety has an active investigation. If you have any information, definitely reach out to public safety. People have asked if there's a GoFundMe, and I've talked with the owners. They're supporting several of the local nonprofits that are basically the Asian Law Alliance and several other nonprofits. If you want to donate, they're suggesting donate to those good causes that are promoting anti-Asian hate and making sure that they're fighting whatever we can do to make sure that whatever we deal with any extremism, and so fighting those causes, fighting for what our real values are from a city standpoint, from a Bay Area standpoint, but so they don't want to GoFundMe, but definitely if you want to support them, uh, you can order lunch, and they're only open Monday through Friday. They were for lunchtime, and they were focused on Moffett Park, and Moffett Park is finally starting to see more employees start to come back, but it's still very reduced. But as far as that is concerned, definitely uh, frequent their business, frequent other businesses, of course. If you are interested, definitely order online. I went by once, and for a late lunch, and they had sold out of everything. So they have only and I like that. It's like they want to make sure that there's good quality. They don't freeze a lot of stuff. It's like it's whatever we're going to make for the day. They basically make it up and keep selling until they sell out. And so definitely pre-order online if you want to support that business. Um, John asked what's happening at Macy's. So if you've seen, the fences have gone up around Macy's, and I talked to the City Line developers last week. So they're currently doing the internal demolition, taking out what they can before they actually tear down the building inside of Macy's. But yeah, the actual Macy's will be demolished sometime in the next month or so. I didn't get an exact date yet. Um, if I hear, of course, I'll report it here. But there's no big fanfare or any of that nature. That building is a little long in the tooth. It was one of the original mall buildings built back in the early 70s, and so and Macy's had never really put that much money into the upkeep of that. And so when the planning commission finally approved what the new building design will be there, so it's partially the residential that'll ring basically Redwood Square, and then that building will mainly be underground parking with retail on the bottom, and then office space above. So that's what's happening at that site. Kimberly asked, curious why Sarah Park splash pad is working, but Seven Seas and others are not operating. What is the thinking and rationale behind this? A lot of kids are congregating at one park to cool off. Doesn't seem smart during the pandemic. Can you explain? So yeah, I talked to the city manager about this. Uh, they are opening up all the splash pads. At least that's their plan. Sarah Park was the first one, and so they'll all be opening up. And as we're starting to get into warmer weather, making sure that happens is critical. But I didn't get it. Staff wasn't able to give me a timeline yet as far as that's concerned. Julie asked, for years we talked about, and we talked about this last week. We talked about how cool it would be to ride bikes. I bought my son and his friends tickets to King Kong at the AMC Theater, and their bikes were stolen in broad daylight. What can be done? I followed up with City Line. AMC is just a tenant, like the majority of the tenants along McKinley, but City Line is going to increase security patrols in that area, and they're also considering video cameras. They haven't decided on that yet, there are bike lockers in each of the parking garages, so that's a little bit safer than just a bike rack if you're going to leave your bike out there for hours. So it is something to consider. I had a question from Mancoon that asked, is there any chance to preserve the sign at Toys R Us? Definitely, this was an iconic sign, especially with the stories of the haunted Toys R Us in Sunnyvale, and could it be donated to the museum to keep as a relic? I've reached out to the developers. I haven't heard back yet on whether or not those signs can be saved and donated to the museum. So we'll see what happens as far as that's concerned. Allison asked, and actually several people asked, any idea what's happening with the old Osh location? So the Osh at Sunnyvale, Saratoga, Sunnyvale, Matilda, that in that area, um, right now. So last I saw about over a year ago, probably about a year and a half ago, is they were looking at retail as well as apartments in that location. Then COVID happened, of course, and things have been dramatically delayed. I haven't seen, no final plan has been submitted as far as I've heard to city staff. In the meantime, they're actually doing ADU construction on that site. So for final ADUs being built up before they're placed in our community. Um, John asked, have you seen the protest flyer circulating about a protest on May 8th at the community center? Yes, I had seen that, and I know that public safety is aware. How do we make sure, um, how will we ensure that it remains peaceful? And this is the whole thing is, public safety does monitor this. We're all for free speech within our community, but they will be monitoring. Definitely, there were incidents at some of the previous marches that public safety, at least one of them said it has now become an unlawful march, unlawful rally. Looking at what we've been doing with different rallies, as long as they're peaceful, I think it's really important that people are out there, protesting, important causes. That being said, if it becomes unlawful, if they're starting to destroy property or hurting people, that's when they do the public safety will be continued to monitor and act accordingly. Um, let's see, another question. Um, do you know? Oh, Minkun asked, do you know how far we are from the yellow tier? So definitely, we're not as close as I would like. This always comes up when I talk to county health. Uh, LA, surprisingly, is moving into the yellow tier. San Francisco is. It all has to do with the number of new cases. And we're still around, we've been kind of plateaued about 1.5%. Um, and so this is all based upon your population and how many new cases you have. Uh, LA dropped about 2 weeks ago below 1%. And so we're staying kind of at that same number on a week by week basis for quite a long time now. So one of the things that you can do, of course, is um, get vaccinated, making sure that you're being safe when you're out. But right now we continue to have positive cases, and so from that standpoint, based upon how many thousands of people we have in our county, so right now we haven't dropped to below that 1% mark, but we'll see. Hopefully we'll get there. Sometime in the next month. And from a governor standpoint, he said that by June 15th we think that all measures should be removed. So we'll see how that goes. Definitely, I I hope that enough people are vaccinated that the case counts continue to drop. But at this point, definitely COVID is still in our communities and a factor. And so definitely do what you can as far as that's concerned to make sure that you're not being exposed. Doing the appropriate measures to make sure that you're not exposed, and wearing your mask when you need to inside. Getting your vaccine is one of the best things you can do. With that, it's after 10. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. I continue to say I'm really proud of Sunnyvale's response to the pandemic. Life continues to be difficult, but new issues come up. But your actions, really make a difference. Uh, Continue to wear your mask, get your vaccine, assist others, and build community wherever you can. I'm proud to see Sunnyvale residents pulling together to help others in need and sharing what they have. I still see the sharing of toys and fruit and food in front of people's houses. If you're out on a walk, wave, say hello to others. People are starting to get having that social interaction, and people have missed it for so long now. But Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We're in this together. We'll get through this together. Thanks for listening. To everyone, please wear your mask, get vaccinated, and stay safe. Have a good weekend and have a fantastic Mother's Day. Goodbye.